It's really astonishing how versatile the human mind is, isn't it?
It truly is.
I mean, one moment we're deciding on breakfast cereal, the next we're grappling with these monumental challenges like curing cancer or
Yeah.
exploring the cosmos.
Yeah.
This incredible adaptability, this breadth of capability, it really sets us apart. But despite our daily experience of this amazing mental flexibility, how do we even begin to understand something so vast and intricate?
Right.
For decades, scientists have dreamed of a unified theory of cognition, a single overarching framework to explain how we learn, decide, interact with the world.
Hmm.
The challenge is most computational models developed so far have been incredibly specialized. Like, think of something like AlphaGo mastering Go.
A classic example.
Brilliant at that one thing, sure. But it tells us, well, nothing about how we remember a grocery list or, plan a vacation.
Exactly. And that's precisely where today's deep dive takes us. We're going to explore a really groundbreaking new development from a recent Nature article.
Okay.
It's a computational model called Centaur. And it's truly a foundation model designed to predict and simulate human behavior across any experiment that can be described in natural language.
Any experiment. Wow. That sounds incredibly ambitious. We've seen so many attempts at unified theories.
Yeah.
What makes this particular approach, Centaur, fundamentally different or maybe more promising?
Well, I think a key difference is the approach.
Right.
At its heart, Centaur is built on a, cutting-edge large language model,
Right.
which has then been fine-tuned on an absolutely massive curated data set of actual human behavioral data, which they call Psych 101.
Psych 101.
Yeah, these two components together, the language model and this huge data set, are really the bedrock of it.
Okay, that's a lot to take in.
Yep.
A foundation model for any human experiment. Gosh, where do we even begin to unpack how they built something like that? So for a long time, the holy grail in psychology has been this idea of a unified theory of cognition, hasn't it?
Absolutely, for decades.
It's been a quest, with scientists back in 1990, explicitly stating that such theories are, and I'm quoting here, the only way to bring our wonderful increasing fund of knowledge under intellectual control.
Mm-hmm.
A strong statement. It certainly sounds like an overwhelming challenge trying to bring all that information into one coherent framework.
It absolutely is, and that it stands in stark contrast to the reality of most computational models we see today, whether they're in machine learning or even within cognitive sciences.
Right.
Take something like prospect theory, for example. Hugely influential account of human decision-making.
Sure, Kahneman and Tversky.
Exactly. It offers incredibly valuable insights into how people make choices under risk, but, it tells us absolutely nothing about how we learn or how we plan for the future or how we explore new environments.
Oh, okay.
And you might even wonder, why has it been so hard to move beyond these specialized models?
Yeah.
It's because building something truly general means accounting for the sheer, messiness and diversity of human thought, not just one isolated aspect.
That makes sense.
And that highlights the significant gap Centaur is aiming to address, moving beyond these highly specialized, domain-specific models towards something, truly general.
So if that's the grand challenge, let's dive into the how of Centaur's creation. You mentioned it was built on an existing large language model. How did they actually achieve this kind of generalization?
So Centaur was developed in what they call a data-driven manner, which basically means its entire architecture and capabilities were shaped by observing and learning directly from actual human behavior.
Okay, data-driven.
Yeah, the researchers achieved this by fine-tuning a powerful, pre-trained large language model on this massive new collection of human behavioral data.
And this massive new collection is Psych 101, right?
That's the one.
Can you give us a sense of its scale? Because massive can mean a lot of things in this field.
Oh, it's truly unprecedented. Psych 101 covers trial-by-trial data from 160 distinct psychological experiments.
160.
Yep, and this involved more than 60,000 participants who collectively made over 10 million choices.
10 million choices. Wow.
And what's really fascinating here is the sheer effort involved in transcribing vastly different experimental paradigms. I mean, everything from multi-armed bandits to decision-making, memory tasks, even supervised learning experiments into a common natural language format.
Ah, so they translated all these different experiment types into text descriptions.
Exactly. This unification is what allows a single model, Centaur, to interact with this huge diversity of human cognitive tasks.
That's a staggering amount of data and quite an undertaking. And the specific language model they used as the backbone, which one was it?
They leveraged the Llama 3.170B language model, which comes from Meta AI.
Okay, this 70 billion parameter version.
Right, and the idea was to tap into the vast amounts of knowledge already embedded in these incredibly powerful pre-trained models.
Makes sense. Leverage what's already there.
Precisely. And the crucial fine-tuning process, which adapted Llama to this human behavior data, used a technique called Couleur. Okay, that sounds a bit like jargon. Can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean?
Sure. Think of Couleur as a highly efficient way to train a massive model without actually retraining the entire thing.
Okay.
Because retraining Llama 3.1 from scratch would be incredibly costly and time-consuming, right?
That's, yeah.
So instead, Couleur adds these small, low-rank adapters. They're like tiny specialized modules that contain only a minuscule fraction of new trainable parameters, just 0.15% of the base model's total parameters.
0.15%. That's tiny.
It is. And the main huge llama model remains frozen. It isn't changed. This ingenious approach makes the training process incredibly efficient.
How efficient?
For Centaur, it took approximately 5 days on a single A100 80 GB GPU.
5 days? That's pretty fast for this scale.
Exactly. It's like adding a very specific custom attachment to a powerful existing engine rather than rebuilding the whole thing from scratch.
Got it. Okay, this is where things get truly exciting then. So how well does Centaur actually predict human behavior? Did it just do well on the data it was trained on, or could it predict the behavior of held-out participants, people it had never seen before in the training data?
It did exceptionally well. Centaur consistently outperformed not only the base llama model, but also existing domain-specific cognitive models in, well, almost every experiment they looked at.
Really? Across the board?
Pretty much. To put some numbers to it, Centaur achieved a negative log likelihood of 0.44. Now, think of negative log likelihood as a measure of how surprised the model is by human choices.
Lower is better, right?
Right.
Less surprise means better prediction.
Exactly. So Centaur's 0.44 was significantly lower, meaning better, than the base llama's 0.58 and the average domain-specific model's 0.56.
Okay, quite a jump.
Yeah, it means it was consistently more on target, predicting choices with really remarkable precision.
So it's remarkably good at predicting what people will do based on what it's learned. But can it actually, generate human-like behavior itself? That's a much tougher test, right? Often called open-loop simulations.
That's an excellent point.
Can it essentially simulate an entire experiment, feeding its own responses back into itself, just like a human participant would?
That really is the acid test, isn't it? Because unlike just predicting choices based on past data, this is where the model generates its own responses and feeds them back in, simulating the whole interaction from start to finish.
Right.
And yes, Centaur showed remarkable human-like simulations across various complex tasks. For instance, in the Horizon task, which is a classic experiment for studying exploration strategies.
Okay.
Centaur's performance, a mean score of about 54, was almost identical to human participants, who averaged around 53.
Wow, that close.
Very close. And crucially, it engaged in something called uncertainty-guided directed exploration. It's a nuanced pattern often missing in other language models. It shows it wasn't just getting the right answer, but sort of getting it the human way.
That's key. And what about capturing the diversity of human behavior? Because we don't all make decisions the same way, right?
Right.
It can't just hit the average.
That's another key point, and yeah, an area where Centaur truly shines, in the two-step task, which is often used to differentiate between different learning strategies.
Model-based versus model-free, that kind of thing.
Exactly those. Centaur, just like human subjects, produced really diverse trajectories. This included patterns that looked purely model-free, purely model-based, and mixtures thereof. It really demonstrates it captures the full distribution of human behaviors, not just some single average strategy.
Okay, that's impressive. It's reflecting the variety we see in people.
Precisely. And one more quick example. In a social prediction game, Centaur accurately predicted human responses with about 64% accuracy. But notably, it struggled to predict artificial responses, getting only 35% accuracy there.
And that's interesting because
that perfectly mirrored how humans performed in that specific study. Humans are good at predicting other humans, not so good at predicting random or artificial agents.
so it even replicated that specific human bias or limitation?
Exactly. What these results really tell us is that Centaur isn't just mimicking superficially. It's genuinely starting to behave and maybe even, dare I say, think in ways remarkably similar to a human, across a vast array of scenarios.
So it's not just prediction, it's getting at the patterns underneath.
It seems that way. It's about uncovering the patterns that define human decision-making.
Okay, those numbers are undeniably impressive, but, in science, there's always a but. Were there any areas where Centaur struggled, or maybe where its performance wasn't quite as stellar compared to humans?
That's a very fair question to ask about any model like this.
Yeah.
Looking through the paper, it actually details very few instances where Centaur significantly underperformed humans across the tested paradigms.
Yeah.
Its robustness was quite remarkable.
Really?
Yeah, the main challenges, if you can call them that, often came when comparing it to highly specialized, custom-built cognitive models within their specific narrow domain.
Okay. So a model built just for that one task might edge it out on that task alone.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
But Centaur's strength is its generalization across many, many domains, whereas those models are hyper-optimized just for one thing. Centaur is playing the whole cognitive decathlon, not just the 100-meter dash.
That makes sense. These generalization results really are, well, mind-blowing. It's one thing to be good on familiar ground, but predicting behavior in entirely new contexts. So, stepping back, what does this broader picture really signify for how we understand human cognition?
Well, it means the true test of a foundation model of human cognition is exactly that. Its ability to capture behavior in any arbitrary experiment, even if it wasn't part of the training data.
Right, the outer distribution test.
Exactly. And Centaur's generalization abilities were truly robust. Take, for example, modified cover stories.
Okay.
In that two-step task we mentioned, Psych 101 only had data with a spaceship theme. But when they tested Centaur on a version with a magic carpet cover story, same task structure, different story, it still captured human behavior accurately. It outperformed Llama and the traditional cognitive model significantly.
Just changing the story tripped up the others more.
It seems so. Centaur had a negative log likelihood of 0.51 compared to Llama's 0.63 and the cognitive model's 0.61. It's a subtle change, but often trips up models that overfit to surface details.
That's impressive for such a subtle change. What about more significant structural modifications, like completely new task structures it hadn't seen?
It generalized there, too. They tested it on Maggie's farm, which is a 3-armed bandit experiment.
Okay, but Psych 101 only had 2-armed bandits.
Exactly. Only 2 armed bandits during training. But Centaur, again, performed significantly better here, with a 0.42 NLL compared to Llama at 0.62. And notably, the traditional cognitive model, which, quote, did not generalize well to the setting, it got a 0.98.
Wow, so the specialized model really fell down there.
Completely. And it even generalized to entirely new domains. They tested it on a logical reasoning study based on LSAT item.
LSAT, like the law school test.
Yep, a domain purposefully excluded from Psych 101's training data, and Centaur still captured human behavior better than the base Llama model.
That's incredible breadth.
It really is. And the breadth of these findings is striking. Not just these 3 examples, but Centaur also robustly captured human behavior in 6 additional out-of-distribution paradigms. Things like moral decision-making, economic games, naturalistic learning tasks.
Okay, the generalization is strong. But there was another fascinating, truly unexpected finding you mentioned earlier, this alignment to human neural activity. How does a model trained only on behavior end up aligning with our brains? That sounds almost, mind-bending.
It is mind-bending. Honestly, this was one of the most surprising findings for me. Imagine training a model only on how people act, their choices, their responses, and its internal workings spontaneously start to mirror the activity patterns happening inside our brains.
How is that even possible?
Well, it's quite remarkable. Despite being trained exclusively on behavioral data, Centaur's internal representations actually became more aligned with human neural activity. They showed this using fMRI analyses.
Okay.
Centaur's representations consistently outperformed Llama's in predicting fMRI measurements from human brains doing that 2-step task.
So the patterns inside Centaur look more like brain patterns than the patterns inside the base Llama model did.
Exactly. And it also maintained this neural alignment in a totally unrelated sentence reading task. Traditional cognitive models, by contrast, showed a substantial drop in performance in these neural alignment tests.
Wow.
It really suggests that behavior alone, if you have enough of it and the right kind of model, carries profound clues about the very architecture and processing of our minds. It's a truly unexpected insight, perhaps, into how our brains might organize information.
Wow, so it didn't just learn what people chose, but also how quickly. That adds a whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it also proved superior in predicting human response times, capturing a much larger proportion of the variation in how quickly people responded.
What were the numbers there?
Well, they used a measure called conditional R-squared. Centaur got 0.87.
Meaning it explained 87% of the variance.
Essentially, yes, conditional on the participant and task. Compare that to around 0.75 for llama and 0.77 for the traditional cognitive models.
So a noticeable improvement there, too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just what we choose, but how quickly we choose that Centaur seems to be getting right more often.
This is all incredible for prediction and, understanding. But how can Psych 101 and Centaur be used as actual tools for scientific discovery itself? This is where it moves beyond just observation, right?
Yeah.
Into generating new ideas.
Precisely. And they've demonstrated a really compelling case study showing just that, using a multi-attribute decision-making experiment.
Okay, how did that work?
So first, the researchers used another language model, DeepSeek R1, which is good at reasoning, to analyze the Psych 101 data from this experiment and generate explanations for why humans might be behaving that way.
So using one AI to analyze the data to understand another AI, or rather understand humans through the data.
Sort of, yeah. Using AI to help generate scientific hypotheses from the data. And what DeepSeek R1 proposed was a novel two-step decision-making strategy for how people choose between options with multiple features, something not previously considered in quite that combination.
So an AI didn't just find a pattern. It actually generated a new, testable hypothesis about human decision-making that maybe humans hadn't explicitly thought of. That's pretty astonishing. Is this truly a breakthrough in how we do science, not just what we discover?
I think it really could be. And then this verbal strategy, this hypothesis from DeepSeek R1, was formalized by the researchers into a computational model.
Okay, turning the words into math.
Exactly. And that new model explained human response behavior more accurately than the three strategies that were considered in the original study.
So progress already.
Definitely. But even this improved model still fell short of Centaur's goodness of fit. Centaur was still better at predicting the raw behavior.
So Centaur acts like a benchmark.
Precisely. So here's the clever next step. They used a method called scientific regret minimization, with Centaur acting as a black box predictive model reference. Basically, they asked Centaur, where does this new DeepSeek-inspired model still get things wrong?
Okay, using Centaur to pinpoint the flaws in the simpler model.
Exactly. It identified specific instances where the DeepSeek R1 model failed to match Centaur's accuracy.
And what did inspecting those failures reveal? Was there a moment of, like, oh, that's what's going on?
That's exactly it. A breakthrough moment. Inspecting these specific failures revealed that the switch between the two heuristics in the DeepSeek model was probably not as strict as initially thought.
Meaning people aren't rigidly flipping between strategies.
Right. They realized that human decision makers don't rigidly jump from one strategy to another. Instead, it's more of a blend, a smoother transition, perhaps. This insight led to a refined model that used a weighted average of both heuristics.
Ah, a mix, not a switch.
Exactly. And this final refined model, crucially still interpretable, matched Centaur's predictive power.
Wow. So Centaur guided them to a better interpretable theory.
It shows how Centaur can act as this high-fidelity reference point to guide human scientists towards more accurate and interpretable theories. It's a template.
So if this blueprint is followed, it truly feels like it could fundamentally reshape how we approach cognitive science. Enabling insights, even with maybe smaller data sets in the future, and pushing us towards, as they say, automated cognitive science. Am I overstating its potential impact here?
Honestly, I don't think so at all. It opens up genuinely exciting new avenues for future exploration. One really significant area is probing Centaur's internal representations much more deeply.
To understand how it works inside.
Yeah, to understand how it represents knowledge and processes information. This could generate genuinely new, testable hypotheses about human cognition itself.
Okay.
Another avenue is using Psych 101, this massive data set, to train entirely new models with different architectures from scratch.
Not just fine-tuning llama.
Right. This would let researchers investigate the actual neural architecture of human cognition. Asking questions like, is human processing better described by these attention-based architectures like transformers? Or maybe architectures that rely more on vector-based memory? We wouldn't just be assuming an existing model structure works best?
Interesting. Testing fundamental assumptions about cognitive architecture.
Exactly. And finally, Psych 101 itself is an ongoing project. While it's currently focused heavily on learning and decision-making, the plan is to expand it.
More domains.
Yes, to include more domains like psycholinguistics, social psychology, and crucially, individual differences, things like age, personality.
Because right now it's mostly aggregate data.
Mostly, yeah. And this leads to a really important point about data diversity. They also aim to move beyond the current weird bias.
Weird.
Yeah, it stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic populations.
The usual subjects in psych studies.
Unfortunately, yes. And why is moving beyond this crucial? Because so much of our current psychological understanding is built on studies of these very specific and frankly unrepresentative demographics.
Right.
To truly build a foundation model of human cognition, we absolutely need to capture the vast diversity of human experience globally, not just, a sliver of it from university undergraduates.
That's a critical point for the future of this. So, okay, to recap this incredible journey we've taken, Centaur is emerging as a genuine foundation model of human cognition. It's leveraging the power of large language models and this vast human behavioral data set, Psych 101. It's not just predicting choices, it's demonstrating robust generalization to new situations and even showing this surprising alignment with human neural activity. It's quite something.
That's right. And the researchers applied Centaur, the equivalent of 16 cognitive decathlons, this rigorous framework where models are tested across a whole battery of diverse experiments.
16 decathlons.
Metaphorically speaking, yes. And in these competitions, Centaur consistently outperformed numerous established, often domain-specific models across the board. This outcome really indicates that this data-driven discovery of domain general models of cognition is not just a promising research direction, but a deeply impactful one that's actually starting to work.
So the final thought maybe for you, our listener. If a model like Centaur can predict and simulate human behavior so accurately across such a vast array of tasks, what does that really reveal about the fundamental mechanisms working inside our own minds? And maybe more practically, how might this growing ability to understand and even prototype human cognition reshape our future? Could it help us tackle some of those grand challenges that, define what it means to be human?
Big questions.
Definitely food for thought. We invite you to continue your own deep dive into the truly fascinating implications of this work.